Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Good evening, my name's Karl. I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank Faith for asking me to come out. And I'd really like to thank our first speaker, Karen. I mean, she was just incredible. She covered the allergy of the body, obsession of the mind, spiritual malady, the alcoholic beautifully. She covered all the bases of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual sobriety, interpersonal relationships, you know, the human experience, the God experience. I mean, it was just really, really incredible. Now, and she was very deep. Now, I've got 4 more years of sobriety than her, and you're going to find me a lot shallower than her. I still, even at 12 years sobriety, I have a strange relationship to alcohol, and I get reminded of it all the time. Most recent one was a few weeks ago. I was at the Black Sabbath reunion tour. I already told you, you're going to find me much shallower than Karen. And you know, it was I just loved it because as a kid I just loved that stuff. I just absolutely loved it. And there I am sitting there in about the 9th row, and it was just going to be great. But the overwhelming thing that I could smell was stale beer, vomit, and pot. And now, a normal person who may have gone to concerts like that as a teenager and then maybe straightened out their life and was sitting there would be absolutely repulsed by that. But I told you, I've still got a strange relationship to alcohol, and as I was sitting there smelling that vomit, stale beer, and pot, to me, it smelled like Grandma's apple pie. I was just like, oh, yes, yes. So anyway, I didn't start drinking until I was 11. I waited a while, and I didn't take my first drink for any other reason than curiosity. That's just why I took my first drink. Had a really good childhood, and just out of curiosity, I took my first drink, and I believe I was an alcoholic right from the gate once I started drinking, there at 11 years old. What happened was my parents were out of town for the weekend. I stole a bottle of wine from my father. I locked myself in his study, and I proceeded to drink. And halfway through that first bottle of wine, notice I said first bottle of wine, I got this feeling that well, I shouldn't need to even describe it in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. At some point, we all know this feeling. It was just, oh, it was warm, and it just, I remember it kind of went out to my fingertips, and I remember taking this big, deep breath, just, I didn't know I'd been short of breath for 11 years. And man, it just felt great, and that's the last thing that I consciously remember of that night was that feeling. The next thing that I consciously remember is I came to in my bedroom the next day, and there was puke everywhere. All over the walls, all over the floor, in the pillowcase, in my underwear, I mean everywhere. And I knew I was going to have to puke again. I made it into the bathroom, and I realized I'd puked all over the bathroom floor. I slipped on the bathroom floor, hit my head on the toilet bowl going down, and as I crawled back up to get my head back in the toilet bowl, I felt that wonderful feeling that I would feel many times later in my life, and that is how nice and cold that porcelain feels on the side of your face. I just loved hugging that toilet, you know, right in between the dry heaves. And and as I'm puking my guts out, you know, I'm in that stage of, like I said, the dry heaves, that right? My mind kicked right in and said, this is all right. We're going to do this again, right then and there. And so, right there, the components of alcoholism had been activated in my life with one drunk. Halfway through that first bottle of wine, I got an abnormal, or a book calls it an allergic reaction to alcohol. The phenomenon of craving kicked in. I lost control over the amount that I drank. I only meant to see what it felt like, right? I did not mean to do what I did. And there I am paying a dear price, puking my guts out, and my mind says, we're gonna do this again. The mental obsession was right there, willing to pay the price right there. We lived in Seattle. That was the summer of going into 7th grade. A typical morning in 7th grade would be I'd show up early for school to meet my new friends at the very edge of the school property. You know, Loser's Corner. Every school has that Loser's Corner where everybody hangs out before school. And our little Loser's Corner there in Seattle had this little beat-up building that the school didn't use anymore, and there was a hole in the side of the building. There'd be about 5 or 6 of us there every morning. And if we're really lucky, we would have a full bottle of booze that some kid had stolen from his father. But more often than not, we would have a parents' cabinet mixture in a jar, right? And in that thing, there would be whiskey, vodka, vermouth, cream de mint, all sorts of stuff, right? There'd be green things floating around in it. You can imagine us 12-year-olds trying to pound that down, you know, handing it off, trying to hold it, and probably puke into our friend's shoe. Now, it was also the early 70s, so we were smoking that commercial pot. Anybody remember that stuff? 4-finger lids, $10 a bag, seeds and stems and the whole bit. And it was even before Ziploc days, so it would be like the Glad bags with about 9 people spit on it as you'd be rolling it back over. We'd pack all those seeds and stems and leaves into a homemade pipe, maybe made out of plumbing fittings and a screen. Or if we're really desperate, we would use a toilet paper roll with aluminum foil and pinholes in it. We'd pack all those seeds and stems and leaves in there. We'd hit the lighter on the seeds and stems. We'd be popping. We'd be burning holes in our clothes. And then we'd like, oh, do we go to school today? No. Now, it's at this point that many people that speak in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous often interrupt themselves and say something like this. I don't mean to offend anybody, but drugs are part of my story. I think it's a bizarre practice for alcoholics to apologize to other alcoholics for doing drugs while drinking or in between drunks. It's just a very bizarre thing, I think. The most bizarre example of it I've ever seen is I was in a speaker meeting much like this a few years ago, and a speaker was up there just giving one of the ugliest, heinous, blow-by-blow drunkalogs I've ever heard in my life. And I got to tell you, when I'm in a speaker meeting and the drunkalog gets ugly, the uglier it gets, the more excited I get. And I was just like, yeah. I think I was drooling at the edge of my chair that night. And at one point in this heinous story, this guy says, you know, I had 4 DUIs, and the judge said if I got 1 more DUI, I was going to go to prison. And sure enough, a week later, I'm in a blackout on the freeway. I hit a family of 4. They all wound up in the hospital, and I wound up in prison. And in prison, I sodomized men. I was sodomized. And, oh, I don't mean to offend anybody, but I did some drugs, too. So, like, by the time I'm 14, I'm the neighborhood drunk, and through a series of events, I wound up in the basement of this guy's house. And I'm trying to control and enjoy my drinking at this point. And about a week later, I've been introduced to cocaine as a way to do that. And it was working, except I couldn't afford it. And so I wound up in the basement of this guy's house, and he opened up this hermetically sealed bag of the most incredible pot I've ever seen in my life. Remember, we're all smoking that commercial pot, and he rolls up this joint. You could smell it in the room even before he lit it. And he rolls up this big fat joint, and he takes a hit, and he hands it down to me. I'm about 4'11". I don't know what to expect, so I just take a big hit, and just boom, it explodes in my lungs. I'm down on the ground barking like a dog. I always called it getting high, but I wound up on the ground a lot, you know. And I hand it back up to him, and he takes another hit, and he asked me a question that changed the course of my life. I can picture it like it was yesterday. He had long, brown, greasy hair, round, rose-colored glasses. It was the mid-'70s, so I'm sure he was wearing bell-bottom pants and platform shoes. And he said, can you sell any of this at school? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So now I'm 14, I'm the neighborhood drunk, and I'm the neighborhood drug dealer, and I forgot to mention, but my father was a neighborhood Lutheran minister. I really wish he would have had your reaction. He didn't find anything funny about this. You know, but my parents, God bless those people, man. They tried again and again and again to try to help me. But you see, they blame my problems on people, places, and things. They always thought if we can get them away from that damn group of kids, things will be fine. If we can get them away from that damn public school system, things will be fine. And they tried all of the above. But you see, the thing is, I'm alcoholic. My problem is not people, places, and things. My problem is my physical, mental, and spiritual relationship to alcohol. That's my problem. You see, if you change the people, places, and things in somebody's life like mine, all that happens is that I'm drunk with different people in different places ruining different things. That's all that happens. And when I was about 17, I barely scraped out of the public school system there in Seattle, and my parents decided that Seattle was the problem. If we can get them out of Seattle, things will get better. So they sent me across state to Washington State University, and I spent 3 years at that university on my parents' money, and I got about 10 credits. At any given time, my grade point average matched my blood alcohol content, about a 0.25. Now, I'm not talking 2.5, I'm talking 0.25, right? 2.5 would be a C average. 0.25 is withdrawals, incompletes, Fs, and an occasional D, maybe like in a bowling class or something. Now, by the time I was 22, this little story I'm about to tell you will let you know exactly where I stood with my family. Now, my father was Swedish, my mother is Icelandic, therefore I look like a polar bear. And I don't know whether this custom I'm about to tell you about is Scandinavian or whether it's Lutheran. I don't know. But at Christmas time, my parents wouldn't just send out Christmas cards. They'd send out this big, long Christmas letter that said everything the family had been doing that year. And when I was about 22, I got a hold of one of the letters that had been sent out the previous Christmas, and it went something like this. And it let me know exactly where I stood with my family. First paragraph talked about what my parents had been doing that year, and the second paragraph talked about what the Morris children had been doing that year. And that paragraph went something like this. Our oldest daughter, Christina, just graduated from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York with a master's degree in marketing. She's now working for the Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical Company in Indianapolis, Indiana, as a marketing director. She traveled to Europe this summer. She saw this, she saw that. Her hobbies are this, this, and this, and she's a very happy young woman. We're very proud of her. Our oldest son, Eric, just graduated from Western Washington State University with a degree in advertising. He's now working for a large advertising firm here in Seattle. He loves to golf, he loves to travel. He's about ready to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou who works for, oh, this will let you know how long ago it was. He's about ready to be married to this wonderful woman named Mary Lou who works for a very small company here in Seattle named Microsoft. And they love to travel together and golf together, and he's a very happy young man. We're very proud of him. Our youngest son, Karl, just turned 22. So it's about the same time that, it was one more time in jail, one more wrecked car, one more broken promise. As a teenager and early 20s, whenever I'd wind up in jail or wreck a car or do some serious damage, I'd always make that promise. I'll straighten up, I promise, and I won't drink and do drugs anymore, and I'll get away from those people. And at that moment when I'd make that promise, you could put me on a lie detector test and it would show I was telling the truth at that moment. But you see, I'm alcoholic. I can't make promises like that if it involves not drinking and using. Can't do it. Can't do it. And it was just one more catastrophe again, and my parents just said, you know what, pack up that car that's in the driveway and go. Please never come back here. And my cars, I'd had a lot of cars ever since I'd been 16 years old, and they would always start out as perfectly good used cars, but they would die of alcoholism along the way. I don't know if your cars did that, but mine did. And this will tell you exactly why I drank. If I were physically sober on any given morning, meaning I just haven't had a drink yet that day, and I come out of wherever I happen to be living, whether it be my parents' basement or a park, depending on what part of my life we're talking about, I haven't had a drink yet that day, I'm a little restless, irritable, and discontent, a little twitchy, and just a little pissed off anyway. Don't know what I'm pissed off at, but I'd be pissed off, and I'd walk up to a car that I've owned for a while, and I'd see the dents and the broken windows, and I'd say, God, I deserve better than that. And I'd get in, and I'd smell the rancid smell of stale alcohol on the carpets, and I'd see the hot box and cigarette burns on the seats, and I'd get madder by the second, and I'd turn that key, and it's hitting on one or two cylinders, and I'd be looking through a cracked windshield, and the rearview mirror's hanging off, and damn it, I deserve better than this. Just a little edgy here. And all I'd have to do was go drink for a couple of hours. And after I would drink for a couple of hours, I'd walk back up to that very same car. Now as it approached the car, I'd say to myself, why that 62 Dodge Cornet is a classic. And I'd get in and it wouldn't smell bad anymore. Then the most miraculous thing I ever experienced prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous would happen when I turned that key. Now after drinking for a couple of hours, I would turn that key, and as far as I was concerned, it was like, boom! It's like a mechanic had been working on my car while I'd been drinking. It was a driving man's dream. Look at the way this thing corners at 70 miles an hour. Right? And I had no idea that for the ability for alcohol to totally change my perception of my reality was going to lead me to the gates of insanity, death, or here. Those were my choices, and in fact, I didn't know it, but those were my choices as soon as I started drinking and had that reaction that I had at 11 years old. Those were going to be my choices. Jails, insanity, death, or with you. I headed south out of Seattle, lived on the streets of Portland, Santa Cruz, streets of Hollywood. The words are demoralizing. That's the only words to use. About a year and a half later, I'm back up in the Seattle area and running drugs up across the Canadian border. Went great for about 6 months, and then it went very, very badly. Really badly this one time. It was just too long to get into, but it was just so badly that I joined the Navy, is what I did. It was just the right idea at the time. What I'm about to tell you should scare the daylights out of you, but on my way into the Navy, I passed a potential test. It's called the ASVAB test. That potential test qualified me to become a nuclear engineer. That should scare the daylights out of you, that the Navy was even thinking possibly, remotely, or even maybe putting somebody like me near anything nuclear. However, they made me take another test when I showed up at that base, and I could not pass that particular test. It's called a urinalysis test. And I was kicked out of the nuclear engineering group and transferred to this group they affectionately called nuclear waste, is what they referred to us as. A year and a half later, I'm a lower rank than when I first came in. I was just driving my car into had already been in lots of trouble in that year and a half. That's why I was always, I could never get past E3. I'd get to E3 and back to E2, back down to E1, up to E2, up to E3, back, I just couldn't do it. My big problem was that whenever I would take a drink, I would forget that I was in the Navy. And the Navy frowns on you not showing back up where you had left the night before. And they didn't buy my explanations on this either. But this one morning I'm driving my car into the base and had a bottle between my legs, and at every military installation there's a guard shack where a Marine will stand duty. You're supposed to politely pull up, and he'll check your sticker on the car, and he'll check your military ID. If everything's in order, he'll flag you forward. This particular morning there was a depth perception problem going on. They say it was on my part, and all of a sudden I could see the whites of the Marine's eyes, and I looked down at my speedometer. I'm going like 35, 40 miles an hour. I tried to swerve, hit the median on the right-hand side. Car went up in its side, and bam, right through the guard shack. I can still see that Marine doing this big dive out of there. That particular morning, they were patching me up at the hospital, reading charges on me, but the most significant thing that happened that morning is that the Navy doctors there gave me medical science's best shot at the alcoholic, at least at that point. A little harmless little white pill with a fancy name. They prescribed this thing called Anabuse for me. Every single morning I had to show up at sick bay, and the corpsman would put this little white pill on my tongue and make me sit there for a half an hour, I guess to make sure it dissolved and went into my system. What I started to experience over the next week to 10 days is the most cunning, baffling, powerful side of this disease called alcoholism, and that is that the spiritual malady had set deep inside my soul. I absolutely could not function or survive on this planet without the knowledge that I could drink sooner or later or drink. I just couldn't. I literally went insane, and the best way I've ever heard it described, that feeling, is by Cubby S. That I felt like a scream looking for a mouth. Just, I'd be walking around that ship and trying to figure out how to look busy. I had to spend more time figuring out how to look busy than it would have taken just to do what I was supposed to do. And, somebody could walk up to me and say, "Hey, Morris, how are you doing?" I say, "Fine! Just don't like the way the sun feels on my skin, all right?" And on about the 10th or the 11th day of being on this Anabuse, my division officer asked me to do a very legitimate task. It was swab the passageway. I couldn't believe he had asked me out of all the other men in the division to do this lowly task. I'd forgotten I was the lowest ranking man in the division. And I let him know how I felt about this. Military officers are very concerned with your feelings. And I said, "You obviously don't know who I am, do you?" And he looked me right in the eye, and as I stand here today, I've never been asked a more embarrassing question. He turned back to me and he said, "Okay, son, who are you?" I snapped, and about 2 hours later I went AWOL from the ship, and I locked myself in a hotel room down at 4th and Broadway in downtown San Diego, the Plaza Hotel, with a bottle of vodka and a shot glass. And as I stared at the bottle of vodka and the shot glass, I remembered that the Navy doctors had given me a warning about drinking on top of Anabuse. They had said, "Son, if you drink on top of Anabuse, you get one of two reactions. One reaction is you'll get violently ill. The other reaction is you might die." As I looked at the bottle of vodka and the shot glass, I thought, I wonder which reaction I'm going to get. And I took one shot, and nothing happened. Authority had lied to me again as far as I was concerned. I waited about 2 minutes just to make sure, and I took another shot. All of a sudden, I felt tingly in the face, so I looked into this cracked little mirror that was in this little motel room, and I was like bright red, blotchy and purple in places. Took another shot. All of a sudden, I could feel my heart going boom, boom, boom. Looked at my shirt. I was drenched in sweat, and then all of a sudden, I was like hyperventilating. We're doing all right so far. This is all right. I gotta tell you, this is a very sick group if you think that's funny. I took another shot, and up it came. My sponsor, Eddie C., calls this next thing that happened projectile regurgitation. Just straight up and out. Thank God I was in a type of hotel room with the toilets in the same room as the bed. Now, on this Anabuse, this type of throwing up was different than what I was used to. One of the tools for living that I had gained out there in the 15 years that I drank and used was what I call socially throwing up. Socially throwing up is where you can be anywhere. You can be driving, you can be in the park, you can be at your job, you can be in front of your grandmother. And you get that, you just got a little buzz on going, you get that little warning, a little sour taste in the back of your throat, maybe a little bit comes up and you kind of go, and you know you've got anywhere from 15 seconds to about 2 minutes, right, until it comes up. You find an appropriate place to throw up. If there's a bathroom available, you use the bathroom. If there's a bush, there's a bush. If it's your friend's shoe, it's your friend's shoe. If you're driving, you get the window down, right? You just, one of these options are the thing to do. But here on this Anabuse, it was coming out, up and out. Now, I hung in there. This is important. I found the magic of drinking on top of Anabuse, and that is that if you continue drinking and continue puking for about 1 to 2 hours, if you don't die, and now it's important, you got to hang in there. You've got to hang in there. If you don't die, after about an hour and a half or so, enough of the antibiotics would kick out of my system and I would quit throwing up and I would just be left with red face, hyperventilating, and sweating. And I already told you, I'm all right with that. So I drank on top of antibiotics for about 7 months. My second to my last drunk, I was left for dead in an area of San Diego called National City. Apparently I was drunk out of my mind. National City is kind of like South Central LA is. And I guess at about 4 in the morning I was wandering around drunk out of my mind trying to buy some crack. Take one look at me. Do I look like I should be in some place like South Central Los Angeles, drunk out of my mind, walking? And then I would always say, "What does this shit happen to me?" Right? And they opened up my face. They had to put 28 stitches in my face, do reconstructive surgery on my jaw, reset it, and wire it shut. I drank again. My last drunk, I was being let out of the San Diego jail in handcuffs. It was one of those mornings. You know those mornings where the handcuffs are extra tight? You're standing there. They had brought me back up to the ship's quarterdeck, and the shore patrol was there, and all these officers were there. And you know, your neck muscles after a good drunk are always kind of loose, and your head is kind of bobbing. And all these official type people are deciding what to do with you, right? I just hated that feeling. I've always wondered if I would have just like popped my head up and said, "Hey, would you like my opinion as to what to do?" Anyway, on this particular morning, the decision was that I was either to get 90 days in the brig, bad conduct discharge, or treatment. And I didn't make any part of the decision. All I know is that my shore patrol threw me back in the van, took me up to this place up at Miramar Base where the Top Gun pilot school was, and they said, "Hey, you're going into the top drunk is what we're going into." And it was this treatment center, and everybody that showed up over the next week, we were all going to go through this 45-day thing together. And on about the third day, this guy named Paco is from some other base. He raises his hand in our group, and he says this. He says, "I hear that this is a program of rigorous honesty. I want to be really honest with you guys if I'm going to spend the next 45 days with you, and my real name's not Paco. Paco's just a street name I've had ever since I've been a young kid, and if I'm going to be with you guys, I want you guys to call me by my real name. My real name's Randy. Will you guys call me Randy?" The rest of us kind of like looked up from the floor and said, "Yeah, whatever, fine, Randy, great." But this assistant facilitator who was looking out for us that day got really excited. He said, "My God, there's the first breakthrough of any honesty of any of you SOBs." And later that afternoon, Randy was paraded in front of us. They had a gold name tag that said Randy on it. They slapped it on him and then informed the rest of us that whenever staff was not around, Randy was in charge. So we hated him immediately. On about the 7th day, they took us all to our first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. At least it was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd never been to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had never had a discussion about I really did not even have a prior opinion as to what Alcoholics Anonymous was. I knew that there was something called Alcoholics Anonymous. Hadn't given it much thought. And all I know is that about 5 or 6 in the afternoon, they had passed the word through the treatment center that we were supposed to be in civilian clothes at 6 or 6:30 out in the parking lot. And these 5 vans pull up. They started reading off names as to which van we're supposed to go into, and then all of a sudden, boom, we just dispersed into town, and next thing I know, I'm sitting in a meeting much like this. It was a participation meeting. I didn't know what a participation meeting was. I didn't know that there were different types of meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. This one happened to be participation meeting. I know that now. And I imagine 10 to 12 people shared for 3 to 5 minutes, and they did some reading. And as those people shared, I believe they were sharing responsibly in that meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, because as I sat there, I got this sinking feeling, and the only way I don't remember much of exactly what was said, but I just remember I got this sinking feeling that these people that are talking know what I know, but I don't know what it is that they know that I know, but I know that they know, right? And what they must have been talking about is that the way that they drank and the way that they think, because that's what a newcomer is supposed to hear in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. They're supposed to hear that we used to drink and how we drank and the alcoholic mind. And I imagine that they must have, just like our book says in Working with Others, heaped upon loads of evidence as to that one person after another. I was just going, oh man, you know. I'll never forget this one guy. I do remember this one guy saying this one sentence. He got called on at this participation meeting. He walked all the way up to the front, said one sentence, and he sat down. He was describing the alcoholic mind. He got up there and said, "My name's Jack, I'm an alcoholic. My mind would have killed my body a long time ago, except it needed it for transportation." He sat down. Just like, whoa, whoa. Last thing that I remember, the next night we went to another meeting, and I got very confused at that meeting, because everybody at that meeting was saying, well, my drug of choice was, and somebody else was saying, my drug of choice is, and I was sitting there thinking, was I supposed to be choosing out there? Do they want me to choose now? What are they talking about? Next morning, back at the treatment center, I asked this counselor, Mary Weber, wonderful woman, non-alcoholic. I go, Mary, last night in the meeting they were talking about something called a drug of choice. What in the hell do they mean by that? She said, Karl, let's play a little game. I said, all right, that's what she used to like to say, let's play a game. She said, if I walked into this room, Karl, and I had a tray, and on that tray I had a bottle of Jack Daniels, an ounce of cocaine, and an ounce of Thai sticks, which one would you take? I started to drool immediately, just, I'm only like 8 days into this thing. Take them all! She started to snap her fingers, settle down, settle down. Tried to bring me back into reality. I mean, I was just like, whoa. She said, you can only have one. Which one would you take? And I thought, if I can only have one, Mary, I take the ounce of cocaine. She then said, well, then maybe cocaine is your drug of choice. Do you understand now? I said, no. She said, what's the problem? I said, well, Mary, the only reason I take the ounce of cocaine over the other two is, well, I take that ounce of cocaine, I get the hell out of here, and I'd sell 2 8-balls. Now I'd have enough money to buy a quarter pound of Thai sticks and a case of Jack Daniels. That's what I would do. Now, there was 2 things going on that particular morning, and that is, first thing that was going on there is I was 25 years old, I was dying of a disease I knew nothing about, and I was still a smartass. That's one thing that was going on. The second thing that went on was a very important thing, and that is that I learned something very valuable about sobriety dates in Alcoholics Anonymous. That if I be alcoholic and I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm trying not to drink, there's one sobriety date. Right? I don't juggle 3 different sobriety dates. I don't know how many times I run across people, for years, in my home group, I often, if I see somebody around for a little while, I'll see them at the break and I'll go, hey, good to see you, how long do you got? And every once in a while I hear this. My drinking sobriety date is January 3rd. My pot clean date is May 4th. Oh, I blew my methamphetamine date last night. Right? Juggling 3 different sobriety dates. And, you know, singleness of purpose is an absolutely very, very important concept for the long-term survival of Alcoholics Anonymous. No denying that. But you see, when that concept is put out with, we don't talk about that, the new person who doesn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous to start with, just in their mind, guaranteed registers, well, if we don't talk about it, I get to do it. And you know, if you're brand new in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a little warning. There's no way to have the necessary spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, or personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism if you're doing a little social heroin in between AA meetings. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Funniest thing I heard about sobriety dates in the last few years, same scenario, saw a guy around for a while, went up to him at the break, hey, good to see you, how long do you got? And he said this, I had 90 days, but I drank last night, so now I have 89 days. I thought that was like brilliant thinking. I think that falls under the same category of being down in Mexico and wondering, would that ruin my U.S. sobriety date? So anyway, after 45 days, they're going to let me out of this treatment center. It's just what the orders were. And in the last couple of days, they were going to let us out on a Friday, and on a Wednesday, they gathered all 35 of us up. They were going to get out on that Wednesday, and they put us all in a room. There was a lectern up front. All of a sudden, the door over here opens up, and they got the biggest, meanest counselor to come in. He was a gunnery sergeant Marine, and he came in his full dress uniform. And I got to tell you, if you ever seen a Marine in his full dress uniform, very impressive sight. Walked on up to the lectern, grabbed both sides, and stared us all down. And I mean, we were all just like, and it seemed like an eternity, and he just stared at us, like one at a time, just stared everybody down in the room. And then he spoke. He said, you 35 have been through one of the finest treatment centers in the world for alcoholism and drug addiction, and we've been here for years. And statistics through the years for this treatment center are that only 1 out of you 35 will stay continuously sober from this day forward. Many of you will die, go insane, wind up in prison. Many of you will relapse once, twice, maybe 20 times, and then make it back into sobriety. But only 1 will stay continuously sober from this day forward. And when he said that, I mean, if it was quiet before he said that, I mean, you could hear a pin drop now. The only thing you could hear was me going, shit. Because I knew if only one of us was going to make it, it wasn't going to be me. We all knew who it was going to be. It was going to be Randy over here, guaranteed. He's like the poster boy of the treatment center by now. So on this Friday afternoon, oh, by the way, he was quoting treatment center statistics, not the statistics of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're brand new in Alcoholics Anonymous, you want to know the statistics of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, read in the foreword to the 2nd edition, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it, 50%. If you come to Alcoholics Anonymous and really try, you've got a 50% chance of staying sober from the first time, and another 25% chance of sobering up after some relapses. Please read it. But the key words there are really try. That's not just sitting around watching Alcoholics Anonymous. That means like getting a sponsor, working steps, reading the book, getting commitments, getting involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you've got a phenomenal chance. and staying clean and sober and having a wonderful, wonderful life. Treatment center statistics are a little bit different. So on this Friday afternoon, they're letting us all out, and there's about various people had various ways of leaving the treatment center. Some people were picked up by representatives from their base. Other people were shuttled off to the airport to be flown off. And there's a number of us that had been arrested the night before down in town, and our cars had been transferred over into the impound base, impound part of this place. So there's about 5 of us out there on the front doorsteps waiting for our cars to come out of impound. And as we're waiting there, one of the guys in our sea bags at our feet, and one guy points over to the other corner of the parking lot. There's this car slowly coming at us, and he goes, "Is that Randy?" We look, "Yeah, that's Randy." As he got a little closer, one of the other guys says, "He's drinking already." No shit. Sure enough, he's got a pint. He's just finishing it off. He's pounding it down. As he rolls real slowly by the front of the treatment center, he rolls down the window, throws the empty right at the treatment center. Crash! Gives us all the finger and drives right off. I guess his name was Paco again. I don't know. Next thing that I remember of that day is I showed up at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous up at the North Shore Alano Club in Pacific Beach, north end of San Diego, at the 6 o'clock gong show meeting. That's where they literally have 4 people sitting up on a panel and a gong off to the side, participation meeting. And if you start sharing too long or they don't like what you're saying, this panel will start whispering amongst each other. A mallet will come out and bong. So I'm sitting in the back of this meeting. The truth about my life is I'm 45 days without a drink or a drug. I'm in the best physical condition I've been in since I've been a young teenager, and I got a lot of information about alcoholism and drug addiction. I was ready for a good run is what I was set up for. There'd been no spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, or personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. I was just there 45 days like a ticking time bomb. And if there was ever a turning point in my life, we were sitting right there in that meeting that day. And one guy, operating on his primary purpose that night, leaned over to me and said, "Hey, never seen you here before. What are you doing?" I didn't think quick enough to lie to him, and I just said, "I don't know. Just got out of this Navy treatment center, and I don't know what I'm doing." His eyes went, bing! Big smile went across his face, and I'm going like, what the hell is going on with him? I later found out he's one of these guys in Alcoholics Anonymous that sort of trolls the backs of meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous looking for newcomers who don't know what they're doing, hopefully of the same sex. And you know, when you find one that says, "I don't know what I'm doing," like I did, it's like a fisherman landing the big one. He's like, "Yeah!" Reeling me in, and he was just like totally excited about this. I found out there was another reason why he was so excited that particular night for meeting me. This was a Friday night, and on Thursday night, this guy's girlfriend of a couple of years had left him the night before for another man in his home group. So he was wondering what to do with his weekend: homicide, suicide, get loaded, or grab this newcomer. He's like all over me all weekend. We went to like 18 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous that weekend. And this guy was just nuts over this woman all weekend. Just absolutely nuts. At one point in this barrage of meetings we went to, he got called on to read Chapter 5, and he got up there and he said, "Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves a simple program. Usually women who are constitutionally capable." Like his friends are like trying to settle him down. And at the breaks of these meetings, or after the meetings, he'd always be off talking to these old guys in the corner. Some would be kind of chuckling, others would be talking to him seriously. And invariably, at the end of the meeting, they would turn him around, point at me. He'd come barreling across the meeting. "We're going to another meeting." He'd throw me in the passenger side of his car, he'd start driving, and he'd start yelling. He wouldn't even look at the road. He had like one of those AA radar cars that just made it to the next meeting, right? He'd be saying, "You gotta go to meetings, you gotta read the book, you gotta get a sponsor." God damn her. "You gotta go to meetings, you gotta read the book, damn her." I'm like, so I was getting a very early introduction. Your typical AA relationship breakup is what I was getting. But I am so very grateful that that man had done the work in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he knew his solution to his pain was out of self, out of self, out of self. I am so very grateful that he wasn't somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous who in that pain laid home under the blankets and whined into their sponsor's answering machine, right? He was out there even in that pain, because I mean those relationship breakups are painful. Really, especially like if you're both in AA and you've been going to lots of the same meetings, and you know the breakup is fresh, and you're sitting in the meeting, and all of a sudden she walks in, and all of a sudden the whole meeting, everybody that talks, it sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher, right? Wah 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 wah. by going to so many meetings in the same area of town, I learned something in that one weekend. I learned something very valuable about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, especially when we're new. I saw other people going to multiple meetings of AA, of Alcoholics Anonymous over that weekend. I didn't see anybody else doing 18 meetings, just me and that guy. But I saw other people that were, were claiming to have time and were at 2 or 3 meetings over that weekend. And what it taught me about how we go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to correlate it to a football game. Now, a football team is out there on the field for one reason and one reason only, to win the game, much like Atlanta didn't tonight. But they're, and how do they win that game? They huddle up and they make a plan and they do one play. And they huddle up and they make a new plan and they do one play. Only in an emergency will they huddle up and do 2 or 3 plays in a row. It's the same thing we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the game around here is one day without a drink or a drug. You're a big winner. Big winner. And how do we do that one day? We run in here and we huddle up. But remember, we're bodily mentally different from our fellows. Break! We go out there and try a little of this, try a little of that, do a little of this. We run right back in here and we huddle up. But remember, we're bodily mentally different from our fellows. And just before we break, some guy in the corner might go, wait, hang on. Before we break, I've been here for 6 months. I'm sober, but I'm broke and I'm bored. What do I do? Some old timer will look over his glasses and say, get a job. Break! We go out there and we try a little of this, try a little of that. And you don't want to push it too soon, though. But at the same time as remembering on a daily basis that I am bodily mentally different from my fellows, I also have to remember, and it's vitally important, that I'm bodily mentally similar to you in here. And in order to know what it means to be bodily mentally similar to you in here, I need to read the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have to know what's wrong with me. For about 5 to 6 months in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was one of those ones that was going to lots and lots of meetings, coffee shops, would go anywhere. Loved it. But late at night, now I was in the Navy, so I also would wind up in different ports, and I'd, various parts of the world, and I'd hunt down an AA meeting, and late at night, I would be like this. What's wrong with me? Damn it, I'm in AA, I'm not drinking, and this feeling's back. What's wrong with me? And I had no idea that I was suffering from a spiritual malady. Had no idea. I had no idea of the concept of allergy of the body, obsession of the mind, and the spiritual malady of the alcoholic. I had no idea that unless I work those steps, that sitting around in meetings is going to get very old, and I am going to drink. That if I don't work the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to run into that peculiar mental blank spot that they talk about in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm going to be wound up struck drunk. Literally just wind up drinking and go, what in the hell happened? And my first sponsor was another guy on the ship. He was one of those guys that, again, I'm very, very grateful for, dragging me around to meetings and hounding me about the book, and I would try to avoid him whenever he talked about the book. Finally, at this one time when the ship had to be out at sea for 21 days, he said, meet me in the aft end of the ship in the battery shop, way down in the engine room. And so I went down there and met him at 6:30, and he came down with that blue book, and he threw it down on the table, and he said, well, have you started reading it yet? You've been sober almost 6 months. Have you started reading it yet? And I go, well, yeah, I've been at lots of meetings, some of them book studies. And, yeah, I've read it. There's like how it works, we antagonists, some doctor with some opinion about something. And in that 21 days, he took me through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. We went right through that big book and when it said to do something, we did it, right there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The man saved my life. Saved my life. And that first time through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I had what I like to just refer to as a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. But the real healing and the real miracle in my life and the real comfortability and the real spiritual serenity, or for lack of a better term, that's what I'll use, came from when I started doing what had been done for me. That's when I started to take a look back at my life and sort of just, I started to realize the value of the pain and suffering. Now, I've just barely touched on 15 years. In 20 minutes that I was talking about 15 years, and I touched some of the highlights that I said them in kind of a joking way. There's some ugly, ugly things that happened on certain nights. There's some ugly, ugly, hurtful, ugly things that happened that nobody can laugh about. And the only reason I can stand before you and be comfortable is through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. The guilt, the remorse would be way too much for me, just way too much. And by sharing that with another man and being given a plan of action by which to get comfortable with that, which is the amend step, And there was lots of weird ways that I had to make amends. Lots of weird ways. It's given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. At 2 years sober, I got an honorable discharge out of the Navy. One of the amends that I had to make was that my parents had paid for a bachelor's degree, and I either had to pay them back or I had to go get what they had paid for in the first place, right? That was one of those things that, you know, I was thinking, oh my God, it's going to take me, I'm going to be able to work for about $6 an hour, and I owe them about $30,000, and that will take me about 19 years to pay them back. And then, you know, it's beautiful solutions in Alcoholics Anonymous. Somebody at a coffee shop just say, hey, why don't you go get what they paid for in the first place? Might be a win-win situation. So I packed up my car, and through making amends, I still had, at 2 years sober, I still had the same car, even with a Navy paycheck. I had to make so many amends. I was still push-starting the same 68 Volkswagen with a hole in the floorboard, with a headlight that flapped around. And I packed everything I owned in my car, and I drove up to Los Angeles to go to school. As I was driving up, I started to think, you know what? I'm going to have to go to school. Got to get a part-time job. I'll stop by some meetings when I get a chance. And, you know, as I drove up the 605 freeway, all of a sudden there was some guy came blazing by in a nice car and saying, damn it! Where's mine? I'm 2 years sober in AA! There I was making a decision to quit before I was halfway through. 2 years sober, thinking I need to stop going to so many meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, maybe back off on my involvement in Alcoholics Anonymous and go get a life. Thank God I pulled into a noon meeting at the 502 Club in Covina. First thing that disgusted me about that hall when I pulled in was that the parking lot was flat. Because, you know, I had to push start my car, and I always liked meeting halls that were on a slight incline so I could get it going easily. And I pulled into this noon meeting, and a beautiful man named Eddie C. came up to me and sat down. I was a little bit early, and he was there making coffee. He had this big medallion that said 1951, and that means that he was 10 years sober when I was born. And he sat down and talked to me and found out what I was doing there, and I tried to tell him, you know, I'm just stopping by a new meeting because I just got into town, but I'm not going to be able to go to very many meetings because I got to get a life. I got to go to school. I got to get a part-time job, and I'll stop by some meetings, and it'll be very nice to see you, sir. But you know, I've got to go get a life. And he just started to chuckle. He said, "That's absolutely wonderful, Karl. Go, you know, getting a job, going to school, great things for a young man recovering from alcoholism. But those are things we do in between meetings, Karl. Meetings is not what we try to fit in between building a life." And what he was really teaching me is that an alcoholic of my type, as described in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the type that literally is doomed to an alcoholic death without this solution, that I need to live in Alcoholics Anonymous and visit the world. What I was about ready to make the decision to do was to go try to live in the world and visit Alcoholics Anonymous. Over the last 10 years since I've been in the Los Angeles area, you wouldn't believe how many friends I have had that have made that decision at a few years sober that, you know, there were more important things to do, and they would visit and stop by meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, but, you know, hey, you know, that's for people with 1 to 2 years. And you know what? Eddie gave me a way to live that has absolutely changed the course of my life. It has given me a meaning and purpose. You know, our book says we need a sufficient substitute. We'll find it in the fellowship. But you know what? Even more than that, the only time I had ever experienced meaning and purpose in my life was right between the 8th and 10th drink. I mean, that's when there was meaning and purpose in my life. And I needed to get that feeling. And I wasn't getting that feeling, even after working the steps myself, right? I had had a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. But you know what? Real recovery had not happened. Real recovery, real meaning and purpose and value in my life had not happened. It happened as a result of getting really active in Alcoholics Anonymous and really, as she was saying that football player had said, being in a position in my life, and my only question is, how can I help? What can I do? And you know what? That bachelor's degree came, and I actually was co-valedictorian at this university. Amazing. Now, the only reason I didn't get valedictorian is because that guy was really involved, the other guy that got it was really involved in after-school stuff, really involved in the politics of the school. I was in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? But we both had really, really good grades. Got a great job with GE in between meetings. And then my life took a drastic change, and I wound up working in the recovery business, and it's even given me more and more value, more purpose in my life, and in between meetings, my life has gotten really, really good. I'm living a life today that I didn't even know was available to a guy like me. You know, I get to go places, be with people, and do things that I had no idea was available to a guy like me. Had no idea. The main thing that Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me is that it's given me a power great in myself in my life that I can absolutely depend, absolutely, fully and completely depend on. That's the most valuable thing that it's given me. It's given me a peace of mind and a quietness in my soul, but I do still have 1 inch behind my belly. I know exactly who I used to be, and it's just right there. But you know what? It's usually coated, as long as I'm doing what I need to do, with this peace of mind that allows me to be comfortable in this world without a drink. Bottom line why I stay, it's not too spiritual, it's just rather logical, that if I left and got drunk, the best thing that could happen to me is I make it back, so why leave in the first place? Right? If I take a drink, I've got one of four things is guaranteed to me. And this was just as true 12 minutes after I walked in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous as it is now at 12 years. If I drink, I'm guaranteed one of four things: jails, institutions, death, or another chance at coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. Gotta say it, seen hundreds, literally thousands of people come back. But out of those four things, obviously the best thing that can happen to me is I'd make it back. So why leave in the first place? Why don't I keep my 30 days, 90 days, 10 years, 12 years, or 15 years? Why not just keep it? God bless.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.